There's something quietly magical about certain on-screen pairings, something that lingers long after the credits roll, something that refuses to stay confined within the edges of a screen. And when it comes to E, few duos have captured hearts quite like, and from the very first moment their characters share the same space, there's an undeniable pull, a quiet electricity that doesn't scream for attention, but instead gently wraps itself around the audience. It's the kind of connection that feels real, almost intrusive, as if viewers are watching something too intimate, too personal to belong to fiction alone. Lola Tung, with her soft vulnerability and expressive eyes, brings Belly to life in a way that feels achingly authentic. She isn't just a character navigating love, she is love in its most fragile, uncertain form. Every glance, every hesitant smile, every tear that lingers just a second too long feels like a piece of someone's real story. And then there's Christopher Briney, whose portrayal carries a quiet storm beneath a composed surface. His presence is subtle yet powerful, like a wave that doesn't crash loudly but still manages to pull everything into its depths. Together, they don't just act, they breathe life into moments. What makes their pairing so heart-melting isn't just the romance written into the script. It's the pauses, the silences, the almosts. There are scenes where nothing significant happens on paper, no grand declarations, no dramatic confrontations, and yet those are the moments that stay with you the longest. A fleeting look across a crowded room, a conversation that starts casually but ends with an unspoken weight, a touch that lingers just a little too long before pulling away. These are the details that transform a simple love story into something unforgettable. Their chemistry feels less like performance and more like discovery. It's as if they're figuring each other out in real time, just like their characters. There's an innocence to it, a kind of emotional honesty that's rare in modern storytelling. You don't feel like you're watching two actors hitting marks. You feel like you're witnessing two souls slowly learning the language of each other's hearts. And maybe that's why audiences can't look away. In a world where love stories often rush toward intensity, Lola and Christopher give us something slower, something softer. They remind us that love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about missed chances, about words left unsaid, about feelings that grow quietly in the background until they become impossible to ignore. Their dynamic thrives in that quiet tension. There's a certain ache that follows their scenes, a bittersweet feeling that settles deep in your chest. It's the kind of ache that comes from recognizing something familiar. Because who hasn't experienced a love that felt just out of reach? Who hasn't looked at someone and wondered what could have been, if only things were slightly different? Through their performances, Lola Tung and Christopher Briney tap into that universal emotion with remarkable precision. But beyond the emotional depth, there's also a warmth to their connection. When they smile at each other, it feels genuine, like a moment untouched by the weight of the world around them. Those rare, light-hearted interactions become a refuge, both for the characters and for the audience. They remind us of the beauty of simple happiness, of the kind of joy that doesn't need explanation. And yet, it's never too perfect. That's what makes their story so compelling. It's imperfect, messy, real. There are misunderstandings, insecurities, and moments of doubt that threaten to pull them apart. But instead of weakening their bond, these struggles make it stronger, more believable. Because real love isn't flawless. It's complicated, layered, and sometimes painfully uncertain. Their journey feels like a delicate balance between hope and heartbreak. What truly sets this duo apart is the emotional trust they seem to share on screen. There's a level of comfort that allows them to fully immerse themselves in their characters' vulnerabilities. They aren't afraid to be raw, to let their emotions show in ways that feel unfiltered and deeply human. It's this authenticity that resonates so deeply with fans. Social media is flooded with edits, theories, and heartfelt reactions dedicated to their moments. Fans analyze every glance, every word, every subtle shift in expression. And it's not just because the story is compelling, it's because the connection feels real enough to believe in. In a way, Lola Tung and Christopher Briney have redefined what it means to be a heart-melting duo. They don't rely on cliches or exaggerated drama. Instead, they build something quietly powerful, something that grows stronger with every shared scene. Their chemistry isn't loud, but it's unforgettable. It lingers, it echoes, it stays with you long after the episode ends. And perhaps that's the true magic of their pairing. They remind us of the kind of love that doesn't always find easy answers, the kind that exists in between moments, in the spaces where words fail and emotions take over, the kind that hurts a little, but is beautiful because of it. As the summer I turned pretty continues to unfold, one thing remains certain. No matter where the story goes, the connection between Lola Tung and Christopher Briney will remain at its heart. And yet, as their story deepens, something begins to shift. Something almost imperceptible at first, like the quiet change of seasons that captures so beautifully. The warmth is still there, the tenderness still lingers, but now it's layered with something heavier, something uncertain, because love, in its truest form, is never just one thing. For his belly, emotions begin to feel like tides she can't quite control. One moment she's grounded over in what her heart is telling her, and the next she's pulled under by doubt, by memory, by the haunting weight of what if. And standing across from her, his presence becomes both her anchor and her storm. That's where their dynamic becomes even more compelling. Because now it's no longer just about the sweetness of falling in love. It's about the fear of losing it. There are moments when their conversations feel like they're walking on glass. Every word carefully chosen, every silence louder than anything spoken. You can see it in the way their eyes search each other's faces, as if trying to find answers that neither of them knows how to give. It's in the hesitation before speaking, the breath that lingers just a second too long. And somehow, those pauses say everything. Their connection begins to carry a quiet tension that feels almost unbearable, not because it's dramatic, but because it's so real. It reflects the kind of love that exists in the in-between, where nothing is fully certain, where everything feels fragile. And yet they keep coming back to each other. That's the part that truly breaks you. No matter how complicated things get, no matter how far they drift, there's always something pulling them back. A look, a memory, a feeling they can't quite let go of. It's not loud or obvious. It's subtle, almost invisible to anyone who isn't paying attention. But once you notice it, you can't unsee it. There's a particular kind of heartbreak in watching two people who clearly belong together struggle to find their way. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Because sometimes love isn't enough to make things simple. And Lola Tung and Briney capture that with heartbreaking precision. Their performances evolve with the story. The innocence that once defined their interactions begins to fade, replaced by something more mature, more complicated. Their smiles don't come as easily. Their laughter feels a little softer, a little more fleeting. Even their happiest moments carry a hint of something bittersweet, like they both know it won't last forever. It's that awareness, that quiet understanding that adds depth to everything they do. And still, there are moments of light, moments where everything else fades away, and it's just the two of them again, like it used to be. A shared joke, a familiar glance, a memory that brings them back to who they were before everything became so complicated. Those moments don't just feel nostalgic, they feel necessary because they remind us and them of what's at stake. In these scenes, their chemistry feels even more powerful precisely because it's no longer effortless. There's history now. There's pain. There are things left unsaid that hang in the air between them, and yet, despite all of it, there's still love, quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. It's the kind of love that doesn't disappear, even when everything else changes. And maybe that's why audiences feel so deeply connected to their journey, because it mirrors something real, something human. The idea that love isn't always about perfect timing or easy choices. Sometimes it's about holding on, even when you're not sure how. Sometimes it's about letting go, even when it hurts. And sometimes it's about finding your way back. As their story continues to unfold in The Summer I Turned Pretty, one question lingers in the hearts of viewers. Will they ever truly get it right? Will the timing finally align? Will the words finally be spoken? Will the silence between them finally be filled with something certain? Or will their story remain what it has always been? A beautiful, aching almost. Whatever the answer may be, one thing is undeniable and have created something rare, something that goes beyond a typical on-screen romance. They've built a connection that feels lived in, deeply felt, and painfully real, and just when it feels like their story has reached its most fragile point, when every glance feels heavy and every silence feels final, something unexpected begins to emerge. Not resolution, but realization. In Ni, love isn't written as a straight line. It bends, it breaks, it circles back on itself. And for Anne's characters, this phase becomes less about choosing each other and more about understanding what they mean to each other. Because sometimes love isn't lost. It just changes shape. There's a quiet maturity that settles into their interactions now. The urgency that once defined them softens into something more reflective. They don't rush toward each other the way they used to. Instead, they pause. They think. They carry the weight of everything that's already happened, and somehow that makes every moment between them feel even more significant. When they meet again, whether by chance or by choice, it's no longer innocent. There's history in the way they stand, a shared past that lingers in every small detail. Even the simplest conversations feel layered, as if every word carries an echo of what came before. But here's where it becomes truly powerful. They start to see each other clearly, not as the idealized versions they once held on to, not as the what if or the almost, but as real people, flawed, complicated, and beautifully human. And in that clarity, there's a different kind of love forming, one that isn't based on fantasy, one that's rooted in truth. For Belly, played so delicately by, this realization feels like growing up in real time. She begins to understand that love isn't just about how someone makes you feel in the moment, it's about who you are when you're with them and who you become because of them. And for the character brought to life by, there's a quiet reckoning, a recognition of past mistakes, of words left unsaid, of emotions that were once buried but can no longer be ignored. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's deeply, achingly real. There's a scene, one of those understated, almost fleeting moments that captures this shift perfectly. No grand confession, no sweeping music, just the two of them standing close but not too close, speaking honestly in a way they never could before. And in that moment, everything changes, because for the first time, they're not hiding. Not from each other, not from themselves. Their connection, once defined by longing and uncertainty, now carries something steadier, something quieter. It's not about chasing a feeling anymore, it's about choosing it. Choosing to stay, choosing to understand, choosing to forgive, and yet the question still lingers. Is it too late? That's the tension that keeps their story alive, because even with all this growth, all this clarity, timing still plays its cruel role. Life doesn't pause to let love figure itself out. People change, circumstances shift, and sometimes even the strongest connections struggle to survive the distance between who they were and who they've become. But here's what makes their story unforgettable. It never loses its softness. Even in the most uncertain moments, there's still that gentle thread connecting them, the same one that existed from the very beginning. It's in the way they look at each other when they think no one's watching. It's in the quiet concern that slips through, even when they try to act unaffected. It's in the love that refuses to fully disappear, and that's what keeps audiences holding on. Because deep down there's a hope, fragile but persistent, that maybe, just maybe, they'll find their way back to each other, not as the people they used to be, but as the people they've grown into, stronger, wiser, ready. As the summer I turned. Pretty continues to unfold and prove that the most powerful love stories aren't the ones that are easy. They're the ones that evolve, the ones that hurt, the ones that change you. And maybe that's the final truth of their heart-melting connection. It was never just about falling in love. It was always about growing into it. And just when it feels like their story has finally found its quiet balance, when understanding replaces confusion and honesty softens the sharp edges of the past, something even deeper begins to unfold. Not a dramatic twist, not a sudden confession, but something far more powerful: acceptance. In This Love Was Never Meant to Be Simple, and Foreign's characters, this stage becomes less about chasing what could be and more about honoring what already is. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't the ones that end in perfect togetherness. They're the ones that leave a permanent mark. There's a quiet shift in the way they exist around each other now. The urgency is gone. The tension, though still present, feels softer, less like a storm and more like a memory of one. They no longer try to force moments into something more than they are. Instead, they let them be. And somehow that makes everything feel heavier, because now every smile carries history, every word carries meaning, every silence carries understanding. They've reached a point where they don't need to say everything out loud anymore. There's a shared language between them, built from years of almosts, misunderstandings, forgiveness, and growth. It's subtle, nearly invisible, but undeniably there. And that's what makes their connection feel so real. There's a scene, quiet, almost ordinary on the surface, where they sit together, not as lovers trying to figure things out, but as two people who have already felt everything there is to feel. No expectations, no pressure, just presence. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. They're at peace, not because everything worked out the way they once imagined, but because they've come to understand that not all love is meant to be held onto in the same way. Some love is meant to shape you, to teach you, to stay with you in ways that don't require constant closeness. It becomes a part of you. And that realization doesn't break them, it frees them. For Belly, brought to life with such emotional depth by Oi, this is the moment she truly grows into herself. She's no longer defined by who she loves or who loves her back. Instead, she begins to understand her own worth outside of that connection. And that changes everything. Because now, if she chooses love, it's not out of longing or uncertainty. It's out of clarity. For the character portrayed by E, there's a similar transformation, a quiet acceptance of the past, not as something to regret, but as something that shaped him into who he is now. He no longer carries the same weight of what if. Instead, there's gratitude. gratitude for what they had, gratitude for what they learned, gratitude for each other. And yet, even in this acceptance, there's still a spark, a small, persistent flicker that refuses to fully fade. Because some connections don't end. They evolve into something else, something quieter, something deeper, something that exists beyond labels. And that's where their story leaves us. Not with a clear answer, not with a perfect ending, but with something far more meaningful, a feeling, the kind that lingers long after the final scene fades. The kind that makes you sit in silence for a moment, replaying everything in your mind, the glances, the words, the almost, the moments that felt too real to be scripted, and didn't just create a love story in The Summer I Turned Pretty. They created an experience, one that reminds us that love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about becoming stronger, becoming wiser, becoming someone who can look back at a love that once meant everything and still smile, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered so much. And maybe that's why their story feels so unforgettable, because in the end, it was never just about whether they ended up together. It was about everything they became along the way, and that is what makes them truly heart-melting.